But it was like up at 4 a.m. It was read. It was take care of the dog, 1,000 words by 6, exercise at 6, back at 7, another 1,000 words. 8 o'clock, I'd start work. Throughout the day, it'd be edit, write, send emails, back to editing, writing, querying, just all that stuff. And it just was like, that was like, for 5 years, that's what I did every single day. Just get up early, start the work, plan the novel, and go. And I got very used to that. I got very comfortable with that because I would produce a lot of work, and I would meet my deadline. So I just kept doing it.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 450 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Jarrett Mazza. Jarrett's work includes dozens of short story publications and 2 trilogies, including Doormen and the Custodian series. He was an honorable mention for the Frida Walton Award for Fiction, nominated for an Indie Book Award, and was featured as a visiting author for the nationwide We Read Canadian event in 2020. Jarrett lives in Hamilton, Ontario, not that far from where I am here in Ontario, and we talk about his writing thrillers and action and so much more, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by my affiliate link to manuscriptreport.com. If you're looking for marketing support, if you're looking for ways to leverage the content of your book for marketing, look no further than manuscriptreport.com. You can save 10% off using the coupon code MARK10, that's MARK10. That'll get you 10% off any of the services. And some of the services include, you basically load your manuscript up and you can get various reports depending on what you're looking for. There's 3 different levels of reports that give you a little bit more, a little bit less. At the middle end, which is the most popular one, is the most common reports that I really enjoy. And these are where they digest they'll pull in your book and give you a summary. They'll give you sales copy. They'll pull out the tropes and the themes. They'll pull out target audiences, comp authors, and comp titles, and tell you how your book is like this author in this title, but how it's uniquely different than that other title. It will provide sales pitches for various audiences, usually 3 to 5 different audiences that are pulled out for your book specifically. And some of those pitches that I've gotten for some of the books that I've loaded have been absolutely phenomenal, and pitches that I am using now today that I didn't have before I discovered Manuscript Report. And I want you to discover how great it is by using a 10% off coupon code. So you can get the very basic, there's the level 1 access where it gives you a bit of details. I like the one in the middle where it gives you the most. It's like a 26, 28 page report. And then there's another level, a higher level. I haven't used it as much, but this will also generate copy for you that you can use potentially in your author newsletter, maybe for blog posts or for social media, etc. And obviously that one's going to cost more. But MARK10, MARK10, will get you 10% off any of those services if you check it out over at manuscriptreport.com. Use the coupon code MARK10 and save 10% off. But more than that, save yourself a lot of hassle when it comes to getting great marketing content specifically for your book. And now comment from recent episodes. For episode 449, the myth of upload your book and they will come, over at starkreflections.ca, I think that's where it was, Edwin Doward said on listening to the last 2 episodes I've begun to think about all the writers I interacted with over the years who have since disappeared from my scanners. I even helped critique a number of entertaining stories that never made it into public consciousness. I could have been one of them, but I chose to keep going, even if the lightning rods I've placed have yet to get that strike that'll take my aspirations as a published writer to the next level. Thank you so much, Edwin, for that comment. So important. And Edwin's talking about the last two episodes, 448 and 449, are basically where I'm harping on about patience, practice, and persistence, and basically advising writers not to give up on themselves. And Edwin, I'm so glad you have not given up. I'm so glad you're continuing to plant those lightning rods as you continue to work and put things out there. That's lightning rods. I think it was Kevin Anderson who had said the more lightning rods I plant, the more likely it is going to strike it. And that leads to, Kevin's popcorn theory of success is like when you're making popcorn, he talks about this with his own writing career. When you're making popcorn, you don't just put one little kernel in a pan of a heated oil and hope that it pops, because they don't all pop. With popcorn, the majority of them do pop. So it's kind of like the opposite. But the one that doesn't pop is probably the 1%, that big success. But it works the same way. You kind of throw a whole bunch of kernels in, and some of them pop and some of them don't. And that's kind of how that works. And so I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to creatives who don't give up on themselves. And I saw something, my friend Emily Potter had shared something that it resonates so powerfully with me, is even if your art doesn't sell, it's still worth putting into the world. And I know that's a weird thing to say, because writers often want to make money off their writing and stuff like that. But I still think that you creating things and putting it out into the world, even if it's just a handful of people that get to appreciate them, you've changed the world for the better. And I'm not going to stop believing that you, as a creative person, investing energy and your heart into creating content and making it available, that in and of itself is making the world a better place. Heck, I know when I'm writing, I'm a much nicer person. I'm a much better person. When I'm creating, I am energized, and intrinsically, I feel great. If it sells, I feel even better, but I feel great just in the act of creating it. And I hope that that you, listening to this, that you think about what Edwin had to say, and you think about your own creative journey. And just remember that the very act of creating is you giving to the world. So thank you for giving, and also for not giving up on that creative energy and that creative spirit that drives you. I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you. That's it for comments. I'm going to roll the bumper. Actually, before I roll the bumper, I should just remind people you can leave comments over at starkreflections.ca. I'm also getting comments on YouTube. And I'm trying to remember where the heck I found comments on Spotify. So I think, was it Spotify I was seeing comments? It was somewhere. Anyways, I promise I'll try to look for those comments so I can share your reflections on what you're thinking about and reflecting on as you're listening to these episodes. I do enjoy learning from your reflections as well. So it's not just me reflecting, but it's all of us. We're all reflecting. We're all learning. We're all waiting for Mark to roll the bumper, get to his personal updates so we can get to the interview. Personal update, I know I shared quite a bit last week. I'm still making headway. I'm still writing every morning, and I'm bouncing between a combination of working on my fiction, on my Canadian Werewolf series, and then also working on some nonfiction articles for writers as I continue to post. I did send a note to my patrons. I wanted to make sure my patrons get access to the stuff from the Substack that I've been sharing for writers. And what I'm going to do is I posted a question to patrons, and I got a few responses already from folks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, just for that content, because the way it's set up on Substack is you can only for the first 4 weeks that an article is live can you read it. And I want my patrons to have access to it, so I'm going to take the backlist of that the Substack, and I'll post it for my patrons so they can enjoy it without having to worry about that time the time thingy. So I also am in the process of pushing something out to patrons, audio only, in the patrons feed, and that is a 1,500-word article that I wrote in response to being asked for my opinion on industry trends as we get towards the end of 2025. So I know that they're going to be just pulling a few nuggets and bullet points from my article, but the way the process works is I reflect on it very deeply, and then I wrote an article. And I gave that to them, and I know in past years they'll just pluck from it. But I want you patrons, you awesome folks who support me at patreon.com/starkreflections, I want to give you that so you get insight into it. And it'll be, several weeks before the published report that includes some of my comments and thoughts, as well as thoughts from other amazing folks in the industry who I'm honored that I get to be included with them as they share their really insightful observations and trends that they're monitoring in the industry. I'm always honored when I get asked, and I thought it would be great to share with you, patrons. So thank you to everyone who supports this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, and of course thank everyone for listening. But that's some of the stuff that's going on related to this podcast. Also, as I was putting this episode together, I realized I talked to Jarrett in the summer. I talked to a few other folks in the summer, and then I realized, oh my God, if I don't interview anyone else for the podcast, and that's not true. I'm interviewing on average 1 or 2 people a week. I realized with the weekly episodes, at this point in time, if I don't interview any new people, it's going to be like the middle of March, like all the episodes. And then stuff happens where I can't release an interview, so I do a solo episode. So I'm trying to think of some strategies. I mean, the strategies are, I'll stop talking to people. Well, I don't want to. I learn when I talk to people. It's so amazing. And then when I listen back to it again a couple months later or weeks later or whatever, I learn again, right? Because I forgot some of the cool things that we were talking with. So I'm not going to stop that. What I might try to do is I might try to sneak in a few extra episodes here and there. And I'm sure that's not going to bother you too much because it means extra content for you. But also, on behalf of the amazing people I get to talk to, they don't have to wait so long. Ideally, it'd be nice for me to get the interviews out within a particular time frame. So I'm going to endeavor to do as much of that as possible. I hope that is something that's valuable and useful to you as a listener, because it just feels better for me to be a little bit more, not relevant, but be a little bit closer to when I interviewed someone to when it goes live, and I'll just have to deal with it. But I guess maybe that's the side effect of people approaching me, more people than ever before approaching me because they want to be interviewed on the podcast, and I've had to say to people like, yeah, I can interview you, but guess what? It may be months before this interview goes live. So if you want to talk about something that's really relevant right now, it's not going to be likely that it's going to be out in the next week or two. And I think it's important for me to communicate that clearly with my guests as well, so they can understand. But I'm moving through that. I'm also, in terms of writing, one of the other things, back burner things related to helping writers that I really need to pick up my work on. And now that I've finished the first draft of that next novella in the Canadian Werewolf series, and sort of have a plan for that. That's going to be going through the editorial process very soon. And while that's happening is a great opportunity for me to dip back into a book in hand. I think I'm about 20,000 words away from being done that one, because I really want to get that one out in February. So I have a heck of a lot of work to do if that's going to be the case, if that's going to happen. But other than that, heads down, doing a lot of work. One of the other interesting things that you may be interested in is I'm doing a clip show for Self-Publishing Insiders Live for Draft Digital, as I'm the backup host. I'm the pinch hitter for hosting that when Jim Azevedo is not available. And I'm doing the episode on the 25th, but I'm pre-recording it, and it's going to be a clip show. It's going to be highlights from a whole bunch of episodes for the year, and I think that'll be interesting to just kind of hear some 1 or 2 minute clips from so many different people who've shared some really cool insights over at that podcast that I also am honored that I get to be a part of, and honored, of course, that I get to be a part of the amazing team at Draft Digital. But that's it for this episode's reflection. I realized that my next episode is going to be coming out on December 26th. So I am a person who celebrates Christmas, so I'm going to say Merry Christmas to you. I'm going to say Happy Holidays to you as well. And in the spirit, and I say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, in the intended spirit that however you celebrate or do not celebrate this time of year, there are so many different religions and so many different cultures and ways to experience it. When I wish you those things, I am wishing you happiness and joy and peace and positivity. And I hope that even if you don't celebrate Christmas, for example, that you take my Merry Christmas and you apply that to something that's valuable and important to you. So no, nobody stole Christmas from everyone. I do, by default, now say Happy Holidays. I will say that as a way to be a little bit more generic because there are so many different holidays that people are celebrating in different ways this time of year. And if I hear somebody say Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or Happy Kwanzaa or whatever it is that they share, I know they're reaching out to me with love. And that's the important thing here. So no, nobody's taking Christmas away from anyone. What we're doing is we're acknowledging that we all have different things that are important to us. Just like as writers, we all have different ways that we approach this writing life. And speaking of approaches to this writing life, I really like the way that Jarrett has approached writing action thrillers, and I love that it ties in with the idea of mercenary writing. And I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy this interview, and that is coming up right after this bumper. Hey, Jarrett, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So it's going to be fun talking to you about writing thrillers in a new age. But before we get into your books, the writing of the books and then how you found a publisher, etc., let's talk a little bit about the origins in terms of how you got into writing in the first place.
I started writing when I was 19.
Okay.
So I started, I want to say, fairly young, but I mostly started writing short stories and comic books. I'm a huge comic book fan.
You wrote comic books. Did you illustrate as well, or just do the stories for them?
So I first learned comic book script writing back in my early 20s, and I collaborated with an artist, and we did some self-publishing for a while. And then there were short stories that I had written. I learned very early on, being a comic book writer, that breaking into the comic book business is really difficult if you're just a comic book writer.
Right.
So I was interested more in like being a writer, it just being a writer. I wouldn't want to tell stories, so I moved from comic books to short stories, and then I started writing novels. And then at 24, I got my first short story publication, and it kind of just went all uphill from there. Very slowly uphill, but uphill.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to dig back into this. So let's go back to the comics because you do write thrillers. Were the comics thriller based? What genre were they in? Just sort of give us a high level look at what it was that you were writing when you were doing the comic stuff.
Right. So there was like science fiction, fantasy. Some of them were thrillers. It was mostly superhero driven back then.
Okay.
But I did veer into more thriller territory, and I don't know. See, comic books was I don't want to say it was short-lived because like I did it for like 3 years, but I just realized that
Right.
I couldn't just keep doing that. I wanted
Yeah.
to get published. So I just decided to move into short stories and novel writing from there, and it just really
Cool.
became what I do. But it's funny that we're talking about comic books now. I just video chatted with a friend of mine, and he wants to do comic books, and I've always wanted to still do comics. So finding an avenue to do that is definitely on my list of priorities moving forward for sure.
Okay. Cool, cool. And then, so let's talk about you started doing short fiction. So, in terms of finding the place to sell that first story to, what was the process? Now, I'm just gonna a little disclaimer for listeners is Jarrett and I are both in Canada. right? So, in terms of markets and stuff like that, we maybe, are sending stuff to the US, sending stuff to Canada, sending stuff to the UK. How did you find that first publisher, and what was that process like? Was it a long, hey, I've sent stories away and then I've heard back and I wasn't happy and then I kept sending them? How did that process go for you?
So I like to so I'm a writer, but I'm also a mercenary. So I basically just work for whoever is going to pay me or publish me. That was my
Okay.
attitude.
All right. Mercenary writer. All right. Okay.
I'm a mercenary writer. I consider myself to be a pulp fiction writer, like in the sense that I write, what do you need? Let me see if I can meet those
Oh, wait. So
demands.
this was somebody who was looking for a story and you said, I got something, and you wrote it for to market for that.
Ba- Basically, that's been my whole career
Wow.
is so when people say to me like, what do you write? I say that I've been published in this material, but I have written a plethora of other things. So starting off as a short fiction writer, I just spent my time basically like an unemployed, just like a mercenary, just like looking for work wherever I could find it, looking for publications wherever I can find it. So I started off on new pages. I would spend tons of time on new pages. I would go through the Canadian literary magazines. I would talk to people and
Right.
just send so many stories out and see which ones like came back to me with a acceptance, but very few of them did. It wasn't until I was about like I want to say like 27, 28 where I cracked the short story market and I started to get a little bit more publications there. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, and that was basically what happened early in my career. So it's just like writing just to stay alive, really. Just
Yeah.
well, if you like whatever you were looking for, I tried to give it to you as best I could.
Oh, wow. I love that. Have pen will travel sort of
Yep, yep,
motif.
that's right, that's right.
So you have published a few different a series, a couple trilogies, and been nominated for the Frida Walden Award for fiction, nominated for an Indie Book Award. How did you go from short story writer to writing these thrillers for Rough Edges Press?
So it was actually quite tumultuous. It was during the pandemic. I love action fiction. I love thrillers. I'm a huge fan of the writer Greg Rucka. I love Mark Rainey and I love Lee Child and I love all those cool cats that write about guys kicking ass. And I was like, you know what? I could do this. So I reached out to a few authors. Just I had no idea who they were being published with. I just found authors that I really liked, Brian Drake, Mark Allen, these guys, and I said, like, I like your work. Tell me about yourself. What do you think of this story? What do you think of that story? And surprisingly, a lot of these authors that I'd reached out to, they got back to me, which I was shocked about. I mean, usually you reach out to authors and sometimes you don't hear from them, especially the bigger names. But these two authors got back to me and they were really generous with their time and they looked over my work and I said, I think this could work, in the same genre you're being published in. What do you think? And they got back to me and they agreed and they said, keep writing. So I kept writing, and I finished these books. And the first book series I ever wrote for Rough Edges was the Kyle Quinn series. But so this is an interesting story. So when I first pitched the book series, it was with Rough Edges Press, and then Rough Edges Press was bought by Wolfpack, and
Oh, really?
yeah, so
Okay.
there was an editorial switch up. So the editor that liked my books was like, "This is awesome," and then he left sadly, and it sort of fell into someone else's lap, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't like this, so we're not going to publish you."
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, it was really it was very difficult for me because I thought like it was moving forward, and so I decided, well, okay, what did I learn from short story writings? Nothing's a no unless you let it stay as a no. So I said, okay. Can I still keep in touch with you? I'd spoken to the editor at the time, and she was like, yeah, sure. So let's just keep the door open. And if you have anything else, let us know. And then I spent the next 4 months writing the Doormen series and spending just so much time perfecting that book series, giving it to people, going to proofers. And as it turned out, they said yes to that book series. And when they said yes to Doormen, I didn't give up on the Custodian series. I continued to follow that one through, and then they said yes to that, and here we are.
So let's talk about the time between them, right? So you had that series, the editor loved it, wanted to publish, and this happens so much in the industry. Then the editor leaves the publishing house, kind of leaving the orphaned books, and then another editor goes, "Oh, maybe not my cup of tea." That must have been a lot. Like it didn't happen immediately, right? So you must have had to have some sort of patience throughout this whole process.
Oh, it was yeah, it was awful. It was just it was so much uncertainty. So I want to say like I had about 6 months to turn it around. So I just jumped right into this Doormen series, and there was very little planning with that book. It was just more
Right,
like, okay, I think I have the genre, I think I have the story. Let me see if I could do this. Sometimes what I do is, especially going back to the whole mercenary analogy, is I just like to challenge myself. I say like, is this something that I could do? I've always
right,
looked at genre writing in that way. Like, could I write a romance novel? Could I write a horror story? Do I know enough about the genre to at least try? And and that's the attitude I took with this new book series. I just said, like, let me try to do it. Let me see if I can do it. Let me finish it. And I did finish it. And, it was sort of like a domino effect. The first book was in, then the second, then the third, and then it was like
right.
new trilogy. And it kind of just snowballed. And then I found myself now like having to promote 6 books. And that's hard. So, yeah, but
Wow.
yeah, it was really interesting. It just took some time to figure out, but the thing is about me is I write every day even if there's nothing to write about. So I'm not like one of those writers that like looks for inspiration or anything like that.
Right.
Like I'm pulp. Like I have a job to do every day. I'm by the keyboard. I'm churning out the work. That's just what I do. That's how I learned to stay alive, like I said, and that's how I learned to stay in the game.
Wow. So you have a full-time job outside of writing, or
Yeah.
is writing the sole mercenary? So wait, so you're making time before or after work to get the work done? And I imagine it's regular daylight hours, so
Yeah.
so you're like
It,
getting up early, or you're
so
doing
it's
stuff when you get home.
So it used to be, not so much anymore. This month I've been kind of changing things up a bit, but it was like up at 4 a.m. It was read. It was take care of the dog, 1,000 words by 6, exercise at 6, back at 7, another
Huh.
1,000 words. 8 o'clock I'd start work throughout the day. It'd be edit, write, send emails, back to editing, writing, querying, just all that stuff. And it just was like that was like for 5 years, that's what I did every single day. Just get up early, start the work, plan the novel, and go, go, go. And and I got very used to that. I got very comfortable with that because I would produce a lot of work, and I would meet my deadline. So I just kept doing it.
Wow, that is definitely dedication. So, did you find Rough Edges Press? Did you find that because of this contact you had with the writers that got back to you? Were they published with Rough Edge Press, or did they know like an editor and say, "Hey, you should check this guy out"?
It was actually all the above. So they were with Wolfpack. They knew the editor. They said that you should check this guy out. And it was just for like I don't know. I was very just like I kind of just skeptical of the whole thing because for so long it would just been the same story, right? I mean, projects would go up, then they'd come down, and they'd go nowhere. But then, you know, uh, the best thing to do, I think, with writers and rejection is, you move on. You try not to think about it, but you just have to remember that everybody in this business is just a fickle mistress. Like everybody is changing their minds all the time. Things are going up, they're going down. Agents close the door on you, and then they open it up. Publishers are closing doors on people, and then they're opening it up. The best thing you can do is just keep that line of communication open if that's an option. So, it's like I'm promoting at Supercrawl this Friday. I was invited by Noelle Allen, and I thought that she was just so generous to think about me. But I'm like, man, like, this is a woman I've been talking to for years. We never got anywhere. I pitched her books, because they're a small press. They can only handle so much. And, she thought of me, and I was like, I just couldn't believe that. I was shocked. And then, like, Jamie Tennant is a friend of mine. I've known this guy for years. I've looked up to him. I think he's great. And then next thing you know, he's inviting me on his podcast. I thought, like, they're like Craig Davidson, my idol, was on that podcast. And I'm just like, how did this happen? And it just comes down to the simple fact, like, I just kept the communication open. I kept the relationships going. I talked to people. I just, because like I said, I mean, it really is, it's not something you can control, as most writers know. You can't control when you're going to get published, but it's that consistency and that faith, just knowing that like things can change. Like the Canadian literary industry, the Canadian literary world is tough. It's a tough world. It's competitive. But there are many writers out there that have like pushed through, but learned how to sort of bend the industry to their will. Or a very Matrix analogy, kind of just you keep going, and then people take note of like you as not so much a writer, but as a professional. People are like, okay, like this person is serious. This person has put in their time. This person, I know this person. I've spoken to them before. I know that they're serious about it. Yeah, like we want if we can help you out, we will. And that was really what happened with Wolfpack. They were like, you're serious about it. You can write in the genre. Just keep it up. We'll keep that door open, and if things change, we know where to find you. And
Right.
that's sort of how I actually got through is they knew who I was, they
Right.
knew I was serious, and they knew I loved it too. They knew that I was like I would ask them questions, I'd buy their books, I'm passionate about this stuff, so I don't try to hide that when I'm talking to them. And then they're like, "All right, so can this professional deliver?" That's really what editors and publishers are looking at. It's like you're a writer, great, but are you professional? Like can you
Yeah.
meet deadlines? Can you do what we need you to do? And if you can do that, then they're interested.
Yeah. And I mean, I know Mike Bray, he's a very brilliant business minded person who knows what it is that he's publishing, and he knows how to get this out into the market in a dynamic way that's a lot more adept than a lot of larger publishers. I mean, he operates an incredibly powerful business. I've had the good fortune to have long conversations and learn some great insights. But I think I wanna come back to so. When that first series had to get put on hold because of a change in editorship and stuff like that, you didn't give up. You said, okay, I got something else. And that was the Doormen that actually got you in the door, ironically, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
tell me
absolutely.
about the Doormen. So what is that series about?
So it was started off as a story about a Marine who gets hired as a club bouncer to sort of like he's going through PTSD. He just got back from the military. He's unemployed. He goes to this nightclub in Manhattan and, he sort of handles a violent situation and he gets noticed by one of the people that works at the club and he gets hired.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be nothing more than like a formulaic, just simple paint by numbers because I didn't want to do anything too crazy for my first book series. I just wanted to
Right.
keep it simple, and that's really what I was getting from. That's one of the reasons why I got rejected in the first place because it was too complicated. So, and my writing, my prose was too highfalutin for the genre, and they were like, "Yeah, you got to dial it back." So I said, "Okay, fine, I'm going to dial it back." But this was basically where this what the story was. It was like Roadhouse meets John Wick.
There
That
you
was it.
go. Okay, I love that. That's a
That was
great.
it. That was
Is that
just
the
like,
log line that's being used
yeah,
on
like
this? Oh,
I was
cool.
just like, so that was like the first book. But then, Rough Edges Wolfpack, they're like, well, we want more than one book. So you got to come up with a different book. And I was like, well, okay, bouncers I can do, but I really want to sort of sink my teeth into the whole world building thing. I want to take my readers by surprise. I want to give them something a little bit extra, something they didn't see coming. So with Doormen, it was like that very prototypical bouncing action film, but then it just became this massive character and morality study that carried over like three books. It became, about secrets, about loyalty, about the past. And yeah, it's just this, it became this massive arc for my main character, John Hayes, about like, was he hired to work at the club by accident or was it by design? And that's sort of where I'm leading my readers in this first trilogy is like, is this all an accident? And that's what so yeah, so just research.
Are the three books in that series are available now, right?
Yeah,
They're out.
yeah,
Okay.
they're
Are there
available.
more coming? Or, like, if you cleaned it up, you left some openings to continue?
Well, there was more, but then my publisher informed me that the Doorman isn't selling as much as it should. So the trilogy that I wrote to follow up has sort of been put on hold for now. But
Right.
yeah, like I said, that could change in a year or two. Who knows?
You never
But
know. Yeah.
for now it's a pretty yeah it ends on on a cliffhanger, but it's very good. It's a very good trilogy, very good introduction into the world.
Cool. So you talked about a bouncer and you talked about mercenary and the Marines and stuff like that. Writing a thriller like that, I'm going to assume that you're not a Marine, that maybe you're not a bouncer, but is some of it based on experience, or how do you do the research for stuff like that?
Well, I'm not a bouncer, but I'm a high school teacher.
Okay,
Um,
so you know how to
so
learn and teach.
I was gonna say I know how to like, yeah, watch, assess. know when to intervene, know when to ask for help, things
Oh my
like
God,
that.
a teacher is like a Marine.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of intersection in the profession. So, yeah, I mean, like I'm just what informs my work is it's not so much the research, it's the love of the genre and other stories that fit into that genre. So I
Right,
have been
right,
a fan of Roadhouse. I have been a fan of the John Wick films and all that stuff. But like for me, I was more interested in violence. As a writer, violence plays a huge part in all of my work. The implications of violence, the consequences of violence, the people who live in violent worlds, the people who commit violent acts. I've always been interested in exploring the morality of that. Like what kind of person or who would be these people that would do this, and
right.
he's just basically exploring like the implications of it. In Doormen, we're introduced to that, but in the Kyle Quinn series, we really dive into the whole notion of violence and trauma and all these other big themes that I think really provide a lot of weight and depth to the narrative.
Right. So the Kyle Quinn, is that the Custodian series?
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, the Kyle Quinn series, Custodian series. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what's Kyle Quinn? Is Kyle Quinn in that universe or just a
Yeah, he's
parallel?
the protagonist in the Custodian series. We called it the Custodian because I thought that sounded cool, but it's like I don't know, it just sort of it implies that he's the only custodian or he's the only like mercenary in the story. But as the story progresses, it opens up to like the other characters who are similar.
Right.
I've always seen it more like it's an action story, sure, but to me, the Kyle Quinn series is just like it's a massive character study. I think that's like I said, like it adds a lot of weight to the story. It makes it about something more than just a man who kills other people. And
Yeah,
that's what,
more than just the action. There's
yeah,
layers to
yeah.
it.
There's
Okay.
like like for me, it's kind of frustrating from a genre writer's perspective because like people see my books, they see your books, they see other people who write in genre fiction, and they're like, well, this couldn't be that serious. I mean, this is just a horror book, or this is just an action series. But for me, it's like, no, I want to incorporate the same themes that people are writing about in serious fiction, and I want to bring them into genre as much as I can. I want to
Right.
add that into the narrative. Because I'm a serious writer. I want to talk about serious things. And for me, just from a writing point of view, like that really excites me. I love when we get the opportunity to do that. You hear this like elevated horror. I'm interested in elevated action narratives, structures, all that stuff. I want
Wow.
to
Okay.
I want to try to tackle that as my career continues.
So I notice on the wall behind you, I can't help but notice there's a Rocky poster, the original Sylvester Stallone screenplay. And
Yep.
again, it's not just a film about a boxer. It's a film about something deeper, right? Is that like that kind of the type of depth that you
Yeah,
want to add?
absolutely. Absolutely. And you think about like, a character like Rocky Balboa, and then you can jump right into John Rambo. You can see like these these added layers to these characters, and you can sort of take them seriously. You see them more as human beings, and the human being aspect is what you use to connect with readers, right? Nobody's going to connect with, a human machine gun. They are going to connect with a human being who has struggles and pain and suffering like any other human being, and that's what I wrote about in all of my books.
Okay, wow. Cool. All right, so I'm gonna flip things a little bit differently now because you had mentioned Roadhouse a couple times, right? As a log line as well as the movie in general. And we're gonna play a little bit of Siskel and Ebert here. So the question I'm gonna pose to you is, okay, so Patrick Swayze or Jake Gyllenhaal? 'Cause have you
Uh-huh.
seen both versions, right?
I have. I have. Swayze. Always Swayze. But
Swayze.
it's funny you bring that up because when the new film was coming out, the 2024 film with Jake Gyllenhaal, I was very excited to see that film. I was not like anti, don't touch the original. I
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
I was, because I'm very interested in exploring like that template of character. I don't think you see a lot of bouncers in fiction.
yeah,
So that too, that was also uncharted territory for me. Like as a creative person, I was like, oh, I don't see a lot of films about bouncers.
yeah.
This could be interesting. This could be a story that's just about bouncers. So yeah, I mean, the 1989 Patrick Swayze film, I think had an impact on A lot of people. I mean, it's a timeless classic.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, no, I mean, you look at stories like that, and you're always trying to, to just sort of learn from them, take inspiration from them. But yeah, no, definitely gonna go with Patrick Swayze on that one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a classic I love so much. Although the new version, there were a couple things that really stood out to me in that movie. The antagonist, the main bad guy. Oh my God, he was hilarious because he had no F's to give, right? Like
Yep,
and
Conor
just like
McGregor.
yeah, that was he did an amazing job and just a tough guy. But then the backstory of the main Jake Gyllenhaal, the backstory. And obviously the way they slowly revealed what he did in his previous life, that kind of brought, it seemed to have some of that depth. Whereas, and it was again, it's kind of like based on the premise, right? Is the premise of this guy in Roadhouse, and I think there was something more about the code that Patrick Swayze's character followed and was taught. I don't know. There are ways to enjoy them differently, but there we did our movie.
So I mean, like, I completely agree. I thought it was very cool that they were incorporating the UFC. They had like an Ultimate Fighter who was a bouncer. I mean, that to me was just no, that was great. I mean, every time they update something or they modernize something, the remake or the reboot will get some things that are right and interesting, and but sometimes it'll just be explored slightly. You want to see more than that, more than this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge slasher fan. Like, I eat that stuff up. I just love it. I think it's great. It's such a pillar of the genre. So you look at like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and the Halloween movies that are just so prolific within the genre. And then in the 2018 version of Halloween, the one that they did recently with David Gordon Green directing and bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis. So that was like the 10th adaptation or the 10th attempt to make a good Halloween movie after the first one. And you're thinking to yourself, how on earth could they pull this off? I mean, people have tried and failed. What makes you think that you're going to do things differently? And sure enough, they did, and it was great. And it sort of created its own trilogy and just sort of reinvigorated the genre. And I absolutely, Mark, cannot get enough of that stuff. I love when people come back and explore things that were previously thought to be dead, pointless, or dumb. Like, why would you revisit that series? Why would you try that? I love when people do try, and I love when they get it right.
Right. No, I love that. And that kind of speaks back to, okay, I left the door open with the doormen, and potentially that may be something that gets returned to in the future, right? Because you've got that, I can have another go at this and take it in a different direction, or in the direction you had planned, just because
Right.
we know the industry changes.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So you're doing some events, nominated for awards, made relationships in the industry, which is always fantastic. For anyone who's listening, what sort of advice would you have for, writers who are just sort of at the beginning? They haven't yet sent that out to a publisher. They haven't yet gotten that first short story published. What's some advice you would offer to them?
I got the best advice. Best advice. But I'm going to start off giving you the advice that they've heard time and time again. I'm going to explain why my advice is better. Okay,
Okay.
so advice you're given time and time again is don't quit, keep going, read a lot and write a lot. You know, make it a priority, try real hard. I learned that all of that is true. So, but that's like common sense now. It's like saying
Yeah.
drive with a seatbelt, okay? If you don't have that down, then you're like it's not so much you're never going to make it as a writer, you're really not going to make it as anything. But I will say this, what you think when you're first starting off is that the people who've succeeded are way better than you. It's very easy to think that way. It's the whole idea of like looking at those Olympic gold medalists that are standing on the podium. They've got the medals and you don't. And you're just like, you know what? They're better than me. That's true. But they're not that much better than you. You think that there's this massive gap between you and them. And I thought that way when I first started off. It's like, yeah, like there's this huge gap. They're so much better than me. Like I'm never going to be that good. Start thinking that they're not better than you. They've just been doing it longer. That's all it is. It's a war of attrition. It's that's all it is. It's who's gonna like wait out the longest, who's gonna quit first. It's like Navy SEALs, right? Nobody goes in the Navy SEAL boot camp better than the other person. Nobody's more talented in the military. It's just a matter of they have the endurance, they have the ability. Everyone who tries out to be a Navy SEAL is strong. Everyone can lift weights, everyone's in good shape. What is the difference? What is that deciding factor? It's the mind. So this whole idea that you're just starting off and you're like, I'm never going to be that good. Yeah, that's true. But if you're just willing to stick with it and just do the work, that's another piece of advice I'll give to you. Just do the work. Don't think about anything else. Don't think about getting published. Don't think about that. Because like I'm thinking like take the clock back 15 years and I'm on a podcast with you now giving other aspiring writers advice when I 15 years ago was listening to said same advice is just insane. It's like it's insane. But this is the truth. So the people who've succeeded, they're not that much better than you. The industry changes. Some people get success quicker than others by just circumstance, not talent. It is nothing to do with that. It's not that they're better than you, you're worse. It's just circumstances and they've weathered the storm. So you have to weather the storm. Get your sailboat ready. Get ready to man those sails. Just try to keep the boat from sinking and you'll be good.
Cool, cool. So thank you for that advice. That's fantastic. What are you working on now? Like what are some things that are potentially coming out or that you're scheming or planning or mercenary writing?
So I wrote a standalone thriller, which I've never done before, and I sent that off to a different publisher, and they're looking at it, and they're like, maybe. They're kind of like, this is going forward. We'll see what happens. We're writing two horror books now. I'd love to move into horror, as I told you before.
Yeah, you said you're a slasher fan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to be a part of that. I'd love to be a part of that genre. So I'm working on two horror books right now. The comic book thing is always happening with me. I'm always trying to get books going. So I'm
Yeah.
working on another comic book, hopefully for a publisher, and looking into some book festivals, do some press. And you know what? I'm also an Aikidoist, so I'm a martial artist. So I do Aikido, and I got a black belt test in November, and that's it, man.
Well, that's
That's
going to help you
like.
with the fights, right? Because you understand
Yeah,
understand the
absolutely.
yeah.
Most definitely, and all that's in my books. So if you're
Wow,
willing
good
to
stuff.
want to get
Wow.
more of an interest, it's all there.
So I have to ask a question because as a mercenary writer, and you have worked with publishers where you submit to a publisher and the publisher publishes it. But we live in a world right now where writers can be DIY mercenaries and get their own works into. Have you explored that at all? And why did you decide, now I'm just going to go with the publisher route at this point?
I don't knock self-publishing. If people want to self-publish, that's great. I just think that if you do self-publish, you're just not going to get as much sort of like you're not going to get invited to book festivals. You won't be able to, put your book forward for awards because the first thing people ask is when you want to be taken seriously as a writer is who published you. It's nothing personal. It's just a matter of, well, if you've been published, you've gone through the channels, right? Like
Right.
someone else has read your work, someone else has validated it. I know when it comes to like breaking into the comic book industry, like they want to know if you've been paid for your work. So that's sort of the main question that editors will ask you. It's like when you apply for a job, it's like, well, do you have a degree? Do you have a college degree? We need something that validates your intelligence and your skill set. You can't just be like, I have the skills because I know I do.
Yeah.
So with writing with self-publishing, I always felt that to be like that would be the main challenge is trying to prove to people that you published this book, but either through sales numbers or maybe there are some awards that take self-publishing. I don't know. I'm sure there are, but yeah. So for me, it was just like I think I'm good enough to get published. And it started with that attitude, and then incrementally it started to validate. People were publishing my short fiction, so why not my longer fiction?
Right.
That's just where it evolved, how it
Cool.
evolved.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay,
Thank you.
so for anyone who's interested in checking out your books, checking you out as an author, where can they find you online?
So you can go to my website, jarrettmazzawriter.com, or you can look me up on Amazon, Jarrett Mazza, and I recently signed the consignment forms with Indigo, and you can find them in the Indigo catalog as well. So
Oh,
it's just,
cool. Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Jarrett, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was just awesome. Thank you very much, Mark. Real pleasure.
So a couple things I want to reflect on here. The first I want to reflect on Jarrett's determination to get the work done. His commitment to writing. Now, okay, I recognize that his approach, getting up super early, getting this thing done, obviously working out and staying in good physical shape is important to him as well. So, take care of the dogs, do the exercise, do the writing. That works perfectly for Jarrett. And that's fantastic. Now, I know that routine's not going to work for everyone. But I do admire how dedicated that he was to getting the words down and for sticking with it and applying that. And I know that myself as having, stuck to a writing routine as much as possible almost every single day in the morning, whether it's nonfiction or fiction or working on editing some material. I'm consistently doing that, and if you can do something for 28 days, 30 days, you can make a habit of it. And similarly, I've done that with the diet I'm trying to stick to try and be more healthy and track the foods that I'm eating. And I've been doing it now for more than a month, and it's working really well for me. So I really admire that. Now the key is not to do what Jarrett's doing or to do what I'm doing, but to find something that works for you, that harmonizes with your life, that can work for you. And that's the important thing. And then, coming up with a plan that works within the parameters of your life. So that's cool. But I do admire and respect how Jarrett has approached that. The other thing is Jarrett's advice of thinking that the really successful authors out there are so much better than me. And we do that to ourselves. And it's a really good reminder, and I'm glad that was the, sort of the advice that he left us with, is, there are great writers out there, and I continue to admire and learn from so many other people. And there are a lot of writers that I know, they're better than me. I get it. I want to continue to grow and learn. But just thinking that every successful author is way better than me, as opposed to looking at where I am and comparing myself to myself last year or last week or last month, and looking at how I've grown and improved as a writer, and reminding myself, just like when you look at celebrity, is they're just as human as I am. They've had this kind of success. They've had this kind of experience. Doesn't mean they're better than me. I'm not saying they're worse than me, but it's just saying that we're all in this. So I can look at successful writers and go, I betcha, I struggle with this, or I worked on that. I betcha they work on that too. Nothing was handed to them magically. We're just all in this together. We are at different phases in our careers. We're at different levels of success as well. But this goes back to the thing I've been continually harping on week after week now, is a lot of it is the endurance to keep going when things get rough. And this goes back to what happened with Jarrett, in terms of saying, okay, I've decided I'm going to do this, and I'm going to send these out. I'm going to send these and deal with the rejections and stuff like that. And then even when, hey, everything's going well, and then this publisher got taken over by another publisher, and there's a different editor, and all of a sudden this book that was supposed to be published is not going to be published, but they're like, hey, what else do you have? The fact that he didn't give up, the fact that Jarrett just kept going and kept writing, and then the right things synced up at the right time. That's the endurance. That's that commitment to writing. That's that commitment to thine own self. That's that commitment to continuing to produce those works that your creative spirit drives forward. And I really like that. I like that approach. And I like that it's a reminder to not give up on yourself. Because, again, that's an important thing for creatives, like I reflected at the beginning of this episode. But that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jarrett. I hope you enjoyed the reflections. I do welcome your comments and thoughts on what are you reflecting on as you're listening to this podcast. But as always, I appreciate you listening to this podcast. Thank you for being here. I am so honored that I get to reflect and share and talk to amazing writers and other folks from the industry in order to learn more myself, but also to share some of those learnings with you, dear listeners. So thanks for being here. Until next week, and until next episode, this is, as always, Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.